Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Traveling Molly's. Here we are, November 2023. It's been many years we've been doing this now. Yours truly, Al DeGenova and Nina Corwin. Um, is
Good
this
to,
our 20? I think this is our 20th year, Nina.
I think it's 21 or 22. It seems like forever and we're still having fun at it.
We should have probably marked the date.
Well, we could say something cheesy about it. I can't believe we haven't come up with anything like
Uh,
yet, but
welcome everyone. Tonight, we have our open mic as usual, and our featured readers tonight are Elizabeth Hoover and Patricia Jabbeh Wesley. Um, we'll start things off with Nina and I. We don't want anybody else to have to go first, so then we'll go into the open mic. So Nina, you're going to start us tonight.
I will. And because of the recent loss of Louise Gluck, I was thinking she's influenced and probably given birth to so many poems. And I was thinking about the one she inspired that's in The Uncertainty of Maps, that was inspired by some from Wild Iris. But silently, epigraph is this what you mean us to think? Does this explain the silence of the morning? The ocean waves won't tell. Likewise, the trees don't speak our language. They just rustle softly in the night. And so we turn to you, oh great celestial psychoanalyst, hoping you'll put it all together. A plus B equals C, something more conclusive than I think, therefore I am. But silently, just out of view, from behind the fainting couch, peeking out of bushes, allegedly from deserts or mountain tops, too craggy to access, your occasional grunts and inscrutable nods are infinitely open to interpretation. Looking skyward, we lie, couch-bound, and wait for answers. Absent that, we project our own. You are the scowling father, punishing father, the loving father we never had. So we spill out our fears and transferential longings, our most precious resentments, serve up our sins in a great buffet of contrition, waiting for your pronouncement, for you to say something, anything, to make sense of this earthly mess. Thank you. And again, so glad to have us all together, even though it's virtual. You're here in my space and I'm in yours, so that's cool. And next, I'm going to have my co-host, Al DeGenova, read a piece.
Okay, I'm going to read a poem that's a couple years old, but it feels like our world is a broken record kind of stuck in the same groove. So this poem, I think, still works. We thought we could. I'll hold the umbrella, your arm in mine. We'll walk through the looking glass, through the ink-filled rain, through what's left of our meaningful dream. Peer back at our scribbled vanity. We hide under desks and behind our tailored cloak of connectedness and precious handmade chapbooks. It's all too much lettuce. Our reality sandwiches are rubber playthings, those old and dry manifestos. The barren, poison-tipped bullets of privilege are forged of synthesized metals. Where is blind Cupid's golden bow? Gone like so many mythic dreams ended, the alarm clock buzzing, our awakening out of reach. We've put the pillows over our heads with easy posts and angered chairs, outstretched fingers that hope and fail to touch more than this wasted, bombed out Camelot. Transform malaise our bourgeois curse, squeeze wine from intoxicating poems, exalting, exalted, taste the profits of jazz, of rock and roll, of benevolent science, their golden ruled breaths, and know again the black and white of sin's responsibility. The alarmed alarm shakes the yes we can dream that was America. No poetry to this dark morning, no trust for a rising sun. I've nothing to offer but my own confusion caught between the singing Buddha and the hot smoking barrel of the dark dynamo menacing in the machinery of the night.
Wow.
Thank you.
Al.
It's a little more political than I usually get, but you know, every now and then.
Still relevant.
Yeah. So I will start the open mic. Who gets to go first? Nina and I have never let anybody know who's going to be next on the list. So tonight, let's start out with Terry Lucas. I haven't heard you in a while.
Thank you, Al, and thank you, Nina. You know, Nina, I think you're right. It's more than 20 years because the first time I read at Molly's was the summer of 2003. So already that's more than 20. And I think you were probably in business a year or two when I read the first time. So yeah, great. So thank you for more than 2 decades of providing this wonderful venue for all of us. So a couple of poems. The first one hopefully continues the sequence here that you began, Nina, with the psychoanalyst, the great psychoanalyst in the sky. Was that the line? This is called Room Therapy. These are 2 new poems. A room should feel like the fort you built as a child. Blankets and sheets draped over brocade chairs, cushions and secrets everywhere. At night, walls should sing to the broken, and the jubilant should hear the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. If on the 37th floor, it should have a water view, green flash sunsets, if lower, a conifer out the window with juncos fledging. There should be a desk large enough for an organized mess, books and drafts of future prize-winning poems. Signs of lovemaking on the floor, the divan, pillows creased and marinated, aromas of wine and exertion. There will be space enough for dogs and children, but no toys, no dogs, no children. Only a window ledge, wide enough to protect the cat from high-rise syndrome. Wide enough to stand upon after your lover is gone. And then the second poem, thank you, is a little bit of a continuation in a sequence, and it's called The Past. When the past comes to you through the cat door as a one-eyed raccoon, scrounging for food at 4 a.m., you lie awake in bed listening to claws whisper along the kitchen floor. Why did she? Why did you? Don't feed it or chase it with your ex's broom, and don't ever attempt to embrace the beast. Remember how the past smells, carries disease, leaves muddy tracks, and those claws and teeth have dug up moldy roots and grubs and who knows what out back. Leave it be. It will depart of its own accord if you pay no mind. And paying from your mind's account is what the past lives for. Oh, and tomorrow buy yourself a present, a new door. You haven't had a cat in years, not since you let it out at dawn at 2010 and a coyote whisked it across the Rainbow Bridge. Listen, the cat flap again. Now silence. Slip out of bed, inch downstairs, flip on the kitchen light. Get down on your knees and wipe the scuffed linoleum clean. Sponge, squeeze, until the smudged tiles begin to shine. Thank you very much.
It's so great to hear what you're writing and see you, Terry. you're in Arizona, New Mexico now? How
New
about,
Mexico.
what's that?
New Mexico.
All right, I'll get out there one day. How about Robbie Nestor?
It's November, so I have two food poems. Since Thanksgiving is coming, whether we like it or not. So I'll start with Feast. It's not holiday banquets I hunger for. The turkeys my mother's labored over, the china that arrived with her from England, with its grand platters and scalloped plates. It's not the gravy or mashed potatoes piled high like clouds. I miss those ordinary Sunday mornings when I would wake at sunrise to read the funny papers, walk the dog down to the playground, startling the flocks of starlings settled in the dew-damp field, tracing their hieroglyphic prints in the soft ground. Every week, my mother slipped a wrinkled dollar bill or two into my hand, some change, and sent me to the deli for bagels and smoked fish. We sat down at the cluttered table, didn't speak, devoted to our task of dividing still warm bagels into perfect halves, splitting golden white fish at the seams, picking off each fragrant shred with the smallest silver forks I've ever seen. Sometimes there was a strip of velvety smoked sable, unctuous and rich. Fresh squeezed orange juice so bright it hurt my eyes. I can't think of any other meal I'd rather have again, especially if it means we'll be together, all quarrels stilled, as we so seldom were at any other time. Okay, this one, I'm sorry if I butcher an ethnic food. Wrapped. There's something strangely satisfying about small mouthfuls wrapped in dough. They come in so many varieties: ravioli, yaozi, pelmeni, kreplach, wontons, mantu, and knishes. In the mood for something slightly larger, there's empanadas or calzone, dosas, crepes, baked, steamed, broiled, boiled, or fried, folded into triangles or gathered into purses. I think about them when I'm standing on my head in morning yoga classes, imagining a dim sum cart laden with small plates. No one can tell us what's inside. We have to take a bite to find that out. The fillings might be plain, and yet the wrappers make them special, whether they're dressed in dipping sauce or floating in a broth. Once folded, like a letter in an envelope and fancy stamp, topped with a silver cloche, it's a delight to scoop them up with chopsticks, slippery as fish, dredge them in a saucer of black vinegar and oil, to bite into a xiaolong bao, savoring the soup inside, or shatter the crisp exterior of cha gao or samosa, burning the tender tips of all my fingers, my lips and tongue. Thank you. Hope that doesn't make you too hungry.
Thank you, Robbie. I look forward to Thanksgiving personally. So, who's up next? Patrick Reardon, what do you got?
as I was saying that when I first got here, my wife and I just got back from Florence. We were there for 11 days, and I spent the whole time going to museums on top of museums. If you like Renaissance art, it's the place to be. So I came back with a bunch of poems, and I'm going to read two about my visits to the Uffizi, which is the big, great museum there, although there are a lot of other ones. So the first poem is called A First Visit to the Uffizi. Looking for Theopista, who is called a saint, painted by Lippi, who is called by Browning a brothel John in monk's clothing, and in the poem admits his out-of-boundness and paints Job nearby with a label, Job, and made long love to a nun and got away with it because rich Cosimo de' Medici the Elder told anyone who would listen, Lippi was a heavenly form in fleshy flesh, no dray horse he. Looking for and finding the woman of the lost luggage cab, and finding the woman of middle-age elegance pushing a wheelchair, and finding the woman of bare feet in moist black soil as lots are cast nearby. Looking at Luther and wife, at Luther and Melanchthon, at Cosimo's grandson Lorenzo, at a thick Roman head like a Chicago grocery guy, at the same woman in every Botticelli Mary, already and always enduring, and turning many corners to meet old friends never seen before in person, and smiling to be at home, deep in the today of ever-present digits, with beautiful shadows. And a few blocks away, the Golden Doors, replica, and a few blocks further, the Golden Arches. The second one is about my second visit to the Uffizi. It's called A History, the Uffizi, a Second Day. A Giotto monk dances with a black bear, sacredly at play. The angel and the virgin reach cautious fingers toward each other, knowing the electric current to come. Martyr Mother Theopista, at the front of a line of saints, gazes, raw, confused, tranquil, in some sort of hope, or at least enduring. Outside, the butterscotch Arno lavas past, sprinkled with a parmesan of sticks and branches, surface floating dead things after the storm. Medusa screams with astonished, painful shock at her severing. The kid Jesus works along with parents to hang tired white laundry on a tree branch. Angel arrival stuns Abraham with his knife. Isaac obscured, a footnote. Under the weighty lid, a maid kneels before and ducks her head into a chest in the background as her Venus mistress models long, soft flesh for Titian. The writer's saint crumbles and scatters the black floor with bad starts. Two warm hands of one of the Marys ache to tear out the spike through the graying feet of Jesus. Inside, we are the crowd these figures dream of. An agony of rain falls of dark, twisting rebel angels. A pensive young woman, often misidentified as Julia de' Medici, looks to the obscure corner of the room. The Cranach portrait of Philip Melanchthon reminds me of our friend Jim, gentle and a chaplain and singer at Easter of the exultant. This is the night, oh happy fault. Dead Jesus with a red halo is lowered from the cross. A bare boy and girl, little kids, hiss extravagantly into a stream. Maybe little kid Jesus and the neighbor girl. No sacrilege in a building where, in room after room, the penis of the baby savior is extravagantly displayed, holy and human, like a naked goddess and a bedcloth in the sun. Thank you.
That's like multiple braided ekphrastic. I'm just making that up. This is good stuff. How about something a little different? Some prose from our tech guy, Bill Harrison.
Yes, and now for something completely different. This is a chapter from my work in progress, a book about it's a memoir about my father, working title, Lessons from the Bed King. And this is a chapter called Family Therapy. The four of us trooped into the therapist's office and sat lined up across one side of the room, as if we were facing a firing squad. The therapist cocked her head to one side and began, "So, tell me why you're here today." Dead silence. "Anyone?" "Well, I'm sure as hell not saying anything." Began my mother, who insisted we'd come here. We're having some problems communicating with one another." "Yes, I can see that." I glanced over at my sister Becky, who looked stone-faced, petrified. My father's scowl cast a pall over the entire room. "So," continued the therapist, "can you be a little more specific about what's going on and what you'd like to see change?" Another long silence. Finally, my father spoke up. "This whole thing is ridiculous. She dragged us here and no one seems to have a problem except her." Okay, what about you two?" she asked, scanning from Becky to me. I slunk down in my chair as low as I could go, without slipping onto the floor. Becky stared hard back at the therapist, but said nothing. "Well," began Mom, "it's like everybody's angry all the time, but silently, you know?" "Kind of like what's happening right now, you mean?" "Yeah." "Is this true? Are any of you angry?" My father snorted. My sister looked for a moment like she might say something, but then, after a quick glance at Dad, thought better of it. I refused to look up from the ragged gray carpet. We sat in silence for an eternity. "Well," said the therapist with a sigh, "clearly something's up in this family, but I can't help you resolve anything if you refuse to speak." Once again, there was an interminable pause. The therapist stood up and addressed my mother. "Mrs. Harrison, there's no sense sitting in here in silence for another 30 minutes. Please let me know if you'd like to schedule another appointment. Perhaps we can try again." My mother nodded vaguely. My family stood up and filed out, relieved from the 11th hour stay of execution. Well, now I know that therapist did exactly what any good clinician would do in a similar situation. Without any buy-in from your potential clients, there's nothing else to be done. Need I say that our family never went back? Thank you.
I guess you don't need to say it. So Thanks, Bill. Okay, next up, my good friend Judy Valente. What do you got for us?
Hello, everybody, and nice to see my friend Patrick Reardon. We're both recovering journalists who write poetry. I'm working on a new manuscript, so it's really nice to be able to share some of these things for the first time with such an illustrious and generous audience. I'm going to read a poem that I wrote. I was asked to give a talk at my alma mater recently on the vocation of writing, and it was for the celebration of the creation of their first creative writing program at my university. And so I asked the kids to try to remember when they first knew they wanted to be a writer. And this was my attempt at that. Becoming a writer. Picture a wooden bench the size of a suitcase in a backyard in northern New Jersey. Above it, the fan-like leaves of a fig tree, their fine hairs. Picture the tree's small fruits dangling like green and brown teardrops, poised at any moment to drop. Then place a 10-year-old child in that spot, overlooking the cross stitches of the Jersey Central Railroad tracks flowing on their way to anywhere and nowhere. Let the child look up at the neighbor's clothesline, strung like an electric wire, at the empty-bodied clothes, the work shirts, baby pajamas, stained white socks, woman's nightgown thinned from too much washing. Let her listen for the train's whistle, the rumbling of cars over a distant bridge, a life beyond. Let her fill each piece of clothing with a story. This is how it begins. This is how it happens on a humid afternoon. She notes the tar scent in the air, the shape of grass beneath the rubber soles of her shoes, and how the children playing in a nearby alley screech like cats in the night. She is soaring above the fig tree, writing words with air, tethered to dry ground, but walking in space. And a lot of my new poems, I'm working on a new manuscript, and a lot of them are about trying to live a more contemplative life. So here's one called Encountering Silence. It is in the wordless ceiling beams overflowing with presence, and the bead-like seeds of the holly oak that crack open to reveal the wisdom of patience. In its embrace, all is waking, even the soap dish, teacup, porch, and the porch steps are expectant. The boundary blurs between the possible and what just yesterday seemed lost. In its embrace, the purple iris finds the courage to drift open. A lone dandelion breaks free from the stone pavement. Blades of grass spread like prayer flags along a wire, and a soundless chant forms in the cave of the heart. A singular music reverberates. It is not in the bird's song, but in the bird's hushed flight, not in the wind, but in the still spring air that beckons and becomes a kind stranger who walks beside us. And then finally, this is the most recent one, how to be a contemplative. Find a window. Sit next to it. Stare at the flower box of begonias, the bees that kiss the blooms and move on. Sit not just for 2 minutes, but linger there. Waste time. Forget the laundry, the grocery list, the buzzing phone, the writing that waits. Imagine sitting on a shoreline, listening to the endless rumor of the sea. Imagine rising and falling like the tide. The face you soon will see in the mirror is the face of every person you've met. It opens like a book of singular stories, unfolding, encompassing everything. The bird song, bee stings, night sweats, sunrises, sunsets, losses, discoveries. Our mistakes are doors. Our successes melt quickly on the tongue. All of it good, all of it a placeholder for meaning. Then listen for the one word you long to hear, the voice that calls you by name, that calls you my beloved. Thank you.
Judy, it's so good to hear your work again and to see you. And now Pablo Otavalo, it's good to see you. Let's hear what you got.
Thank you so much. I have two for you today. So I hope you like them. The first one is By Night. We sense our way to the edge of a ravine, seeking out a little wooden structure that midday bears no resemblance to an ancient temple. But as the moon outlines its pale pine struts beneath elms, it becomes a place for pilgrimage. The lake breathes slowly past the tree line, below the shrubs and thistle, out a pebble field and sandy shore, crinkling like newspaper. Elsewhere, unmanned drones target villages, break the night with thunder and cries. The stillness quickens the pulse, a primordial instinct to mistrust the snap of twigs, the crackle of dry leaves. The difficult world quiets. We press against a railing, lean above the drop. The ebbing of the lake like sighing, like mourning. Hold the faceless night, full of neither joy, nor love, nor light. Thank you. And this one is When We Hear the Dead as Numbers. It is hard to grasp 10,000 leaves falling in a great big pile, or even walk by a few with your hands in the air and children crying. But what about the other leaves you didn't mention? Who picked those up? And the ones before and before and before? And it will never reach far enough back for anyone to forgive an inch of land. Sand and salt water, olive trees and concrete walls, stones on stones. How many of your enemy's children must die for you to feel safe? Hunger we can bear, but we cannot bear this much death that surrounds us from everywhere.
Oh, thank you, Pablo. Boy, this reading tonight is leaning toward the sublime. Everybody's really powerful stuff. Next up, Bob Chacoin. Robert.
I'm here to lean us in the other direction. My usual 6 minutes of shorties for your perusal.
4.
Tree. When you take your time, time says, wait, that's not yours to take. And then time finds it can do without and will not miss the little of itself you took. Anytime I catch myself saying, I don't care, I think Jimmy crack corn and find that I do care to know what the hay that blue tail fly is all about. Passing it forward. When I gave up the sauce, I poured the last of the half-finished bottle of really good wine onto the vegetable garden and felt the eyes of the soil roll up into its skull. If I am rotten to the core, will I decompose that much faster? I no longer rely on an afterlife, but I believe the earth will know what to do with me. The last trick-or-treater of the night gives a haiku in trade for candy, so I repair deep into the house to produce the Goo Goo Bar and the Charleston Chew I had been saving for my mourners. As my mother grew hard of hearing, she also grew old without fear, so at every minatory bump in the night, she got up and answered the door. Even when I crush a dark spider at the urgent request of my daughter, I feel not so much the pride or indulgence of the father, but the guilt of the survivor. You can be literal all the time, every day, and still live a good life. Joltin' Joe DiMaggio, after he heard the song Mrs. Robinson, said to Simon and Garfunkel, "What are you talking about? I haven't gone anywhere." And he was married to Marilyn Monroe, who loved everything else about him, but had to leave before long because he didn't get metaphor. Every autumn, the abyss dreams of being filled with leaves, so one falling in would crunch through bottomless softness. Then winter arrives with its natural crevasses, and the abyss full of emptiness goes back to what it does best. And finally, Auburn Gresham. Forgetting your name again, my long ago love, I drive through the old neighborhood, calling out loud the street names as I cross them. Sangamon, May, Ada, Paulina, Honoree, Seeley, Claremont, hoping one of them, whom I once ran with and then ran away from, will ring a bell. Thanks for your ears, my friends.
Thanks for what you give our ears, Bob. Really, sublime can get to be too much without a little ridiculous thrown in. Where would we be? So Jess Holmes, are you ready?
I am, yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you all for having me. This is actually the first time I've read some of these poems out loud, so bear with me. I chose a few selections from my memoir in verse titled A Search for Softness. The island sun never left your skin. Landlocked for years, still smell of mangoes. You feel like new leather, burnt orange and smooth, but strong enough. The blackest of black lives in your eyes, darker than any crevice in the sea. They force me in while I continue to fall. Glaring as the morning sun on fresh snow, no man shines like you. Falling to you, for you, onto you. Tequila tastes sweeter coming from your mouth. A good distraction from the scratchy grass causing rashes to form around the dimples on my lower back. I'm glad I like cigarettes now. They help me remember to breathe. It's hard to do around you. Secrets pour out, running from the fire, crackling inside of us. You always were darker than me. Your father, my father, the world's not as cruel as you think. Engulfed in the flame together. That's worth something, right? I promise to sneak you smokes, drown out the cries of your temporary roommates and smell of piss. Recovery cannot happen here, or forgiveness. The pills are taking you away from me, again. Your hand has never pulled away before. What did you want me to do? I'm no angel, but please don't leave me out there alone. The sheer sheets can't hide the grayness of your skin or contorted jawline. I was wrong to think I would never see you grow old. 10 stories will age you quickly. Your outsides finally match your insides. Nobody should see you like this. They don't understand hopelessness. I want to kiss you, wake you up, or let me lie in there with you. And the last one. The moment a memory creeps in, take a drink. I crave your touch, but run from your existence. Wipe everything, start again. A life without you must be better than a life where I lose you. I lose myself instead, in the bottoms of bottles and other people's beds. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Jess. Welcome.
I'm
Come
back.
again. Come again.
And Al, why don't you, we haven't talked at all about money and all that stuff.
All that stuff. Well, we have, before we get to our last open micer, we try to take in the old days, in the real world, we would pass a hat for our features. So we do that virtually now. And I will put a link into the chat and onto YouTube for anyone who would like to donate to the hat that we pass around for our features. So I will do that now. And to close out the open mic before we bring up our features tonight, Elizabeth and Patricia, John Simmons, bring us home.
Oh, hi, Kay. Thank you very much, Al, and also Nina, and also Bill and everybody else. Thanks for allowing me in. And this is called Optical Illusions. The face from the mirror glancing back at me is not the one I'd hoped it would be. The eyes are old, and though they see, pouches of skin now crinkly display extra years of seeming and scenic fatigue that I could have had cut back for free as part of a skin doctor's plea that it could all be tucked into a Medicare bill for squamous carcinoma surgery on cell growths about to be knifed out from nearby forehead and brows. But I demurred his entreaty because the notion seemed risky, that blades could dig so close to the 20-30 gazers that still work for me, despite puffy lid squints for all to see, and maybe wonder what my elderly iris and pupils once looked like when their owner winked or fluttered so mischievously at people he'd meet uncertainly and wanted to exit from charmingly. Thank you very much.
All right. I guess that's it for the open mic. And now we move on to the second half of the evening with our features and conversation after, which I'm really looking forward to. I do want to say that next month we will have Maria Nazos and Reginald Gibbons, who has been around and has been an influence to so many. And I'm looking forward to that, but even more right now, we have two wonderful poets. Elizabeth, are you ready to go? All right, I'm gonna introduce you to Elizabeth Hoover. She's the author of The Archive is All in Present Tense, winner of the 2021 Barrow Street Book Prize. Her creative nonfiction has appeared in the North American Review, the Kenyon Review, and Story Quarterly. She teaches in the English department at Webster University in St. Louis, and I had the pleasure of choosing her poetry for a reading I was curating at Woman Made Gallery, and it was wonderful discovery. So I'm looking forward to hearing you.
Thank you so much, Nina. I think that reading at Woman Made was like 5 or 6 years ago. And so much, it feels like so much happened since, but I loved reading in the gallery and meeting all the other folks that read with me, some of whom I'm still in contact with.
Do you remember what the theme was for that one?
I can't, well, it was propaganda.
Yeah.
It was propaganda. I couldn't remember, and then all of a sudden it came to me. Sorry, I'm a little distracted. Apparently, we must have ghosts. My cat has found a ghost and is being a little disruptive. So I'm sorry about that.
Well, as long as she doesn't kill it.
Don't kill the ghost. I really loved hearing all of the open mic readers. When I was at the Tin House workshop, they would have featured readers, but then they would have the open mic afterwards. And I was so excited to be in the open mic, but the featured readers just left. And so when Nina reached out to me and told me that the open mic was happening first, it felt like a really beautiful communication of your values for this reading. And so I'm really happy to be a part of it. Oh my God, please stop. Okay, sorry. So I'm going to be reading from my book, The Archive is All in Present Tense. It's a book-length series of poems that follows a fictional researcher working in a fantastical archive with a limitless collection. And so because it is a limitless archive, lots of different narratives emerge. And so each time I read, I pick a different one. And I think I'm going to focus on like clothing tonight. So this is the first poem. It's called The Archive is All in Present Tense. Librarians turn slender shadows in the afternoon light, gathering materials along the ledge. 3 men exit a jeep on a hillside. Doors slam in unison. 2 orphans walk into a dance for soldiers. Wind winters down from the north. Concertina wire unspools like fat loops of cursive. I've always wanted a boyfriend like you. Language making it impossible for her to love me back, though no one could love me now. Preoccupied as I am by war, paging arrest records, letters, diaries, clippings in their acid-free envelopes. I sort through tea lights, radio crackles, paper fortune tellers predicting the man who will marry you, the house he will buy for you, paper turning to snow in her hands, folding, unfolding. After the librarians bring the snow, I check if they are watching, then touch the jars to feel the cold of silence, of waiting. The men pass concertina wire hand to hand as trucks convey people up the mountain. One orphan creases his hat, the other smooths her pleats, practices American slang. A letter turns over to an empty verso, a blank my want tumbles into. The archive is full of blanks. So many the archivists come before dawn to catalog them and are still behind. Hello. The librarians bring everything I write on a call slip without judgment or warning. I write en masse. I write war bride. I write amnesty. I write savagery as the natural condition of the human race. I write I can't keep my men from the refugee women. I page dirt from the camp floor, blankets and hunger, sickness and sorrow. I could page his service records or the stories he told about how his commanders liked him so much they kept me from all that. I could page the women's voices in their velvet bags bound with string. The archive is full of string, full of wire and casing and food stamp books and adoption records and wills and transfer requests. The archive is full of tanks and spears and muskets and porcelain and dollars and steamboats and axes and folly and fall, cataloged so I can page it all. So as we were waiting for the reading to start, Patricia mentioned being from living in Altoona now, and one of the aspects that I pulled from my own life is that both of my grandparents on my mother's side were orphans, and my grandfather worked for an underwater construction company based out of Altoona. And so I think my grandmother was a war bride from England, and I just think about her coming from the New Forest region of England and ending up in, well, the town they lived in is now a Superfund site because it was the site of a munitions dump, but that incredible contrast. Anyways, this is called The Archive Husband's Time, and it the cat has a tea bag now, just to keep you updated. The poem mentions the FSA, which stands for the Farm Security Administration, which was a New Deal project that included, among other things, photographing rural life. And Dorothea Lange was a photographer who chronicled that through the FSA. She actually used color film, and those were recently uncovered. This is called The Archive Husband's Time. Today, the archive is the empty chambers of the dead nautilist, boiled clean. Pages whisper like lovers in a language I can't identify. Crows tell all they witness. I transcribe their cackles, telegram orthologists. Study cuneiform fractures in a hunger weakened bone, cataloged under inscriptions, osteology, bride. Double check introduction to Sumerian grammar, but my translation keeps reading, a boyfriend like you. Really, no one was ever nice to me, and I can't tell any. Swaying by the reshelving station, librarians fold used call slips into fortune tellers, pointing at their chosen flaps. I gather my notes, collect my bag from a hallway locker. In the parking lot, an archivist makes a show of looking for their keys. I try a friendly hello, but it's laced with defeat. Consider time, they say, like a typewriter. Out here, one thing happens after another, causal or not, anywhere along that spectrum. Their cheeks sparkle under circular glasses, as if they swiped on graphite for blush. In the archive, time submits to the catalog. Out here, they motion like baling wire. Time is master. I step closer to examine their bow tie. Whirring Kodachrome, reel-to-reel tape, they lean back, light in their spectators. Good luck, they type into the wind and duck into their car, leaving me in a blank landscape, timeless as an FSA photograph. This poem is called, oh, thank you. This poem is called The Archive Falls Silent as Snow. The librarians reshelved the passing season, desks mounded with clumsy flowers, air peppered with pollen, huffy bees shooed into apiaries. I am buried under a morning's worth of paging. A John Wayne poster taped to a Jeep's glove box, airmail love letters between orphans. Her third time asking if there will ever be a plane ticket, divorce paper, white hoods of clergy, even my sister's paper on symbolism in Fitzgerald. Gadsby wore white for his reunion with Daisy to display his purity. She writes for a D. I stopped writing her papers after she caught me in a thrift store tux, having struggled out of tulle in our grandfather's cream Buick. I won't tell anyone else, she begged. Please just help me. My silence fell like an October snow, so sudden. The pioneer woman knew her husband would be trapped at the ranch, wood soaked through. She slaughtered the ox herself, dragged it inside, nestled her children between steaming lungs where their father found them, chipped them free. How strange to be reborn from an ox, your father a midwife, your mother a statue, your afterbirth precious stone. A mound of goldenrod topples and librarians rush to prop it up. They drop to their knees, shimmying leaves into envelopes. I brush blossoms onto sheets of paper. I sneak into the stacks, run my hands along metal shelves. At the corridor's end, light from a small room where the archivist bends over a desk, stringing bones on wire, fashioning marionettes. Without turning, they draw a sheet over their work and a ribbon spools from their mouth. I see you've come looking for the taxidermy collection. Yeah, so I wore a tux to prom and I was kicked out. And I don't regret wearing a tux to prom. I do regret wearing that tux to prom. This is before I learned about things like tailoring. So I was raised in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Museum for Natural History is famous for its dioramas, and some of them actually. I always intend just to read poetry, but then random facts appear, and I have to say them. One of their most famous depicts what they characterize as a Bedouin mannequin being attacked by lions, and restorers found that it contained human remains, and they recently removed it from display. But anyways, I grew up going to these dioramas, and so this is called Only Rugged Mountaineers Live in the Archive. I marvel at the taxidermist precision, flesh pinned open like a bloom, bristles of the cub's tongue dewy with blood. The archivist beckons and I follow, wondering at my quiet ally, how they stay apart from the others, their affinity for bones, their familiarity as if they found me long ago, cataloged under adolescent daydreams and childhood hurt. I stumble against coyotes dangling a work shirt from ruddy jaws and cry out. The archivist covers my mouth. Hush, they say, index finger perched on the notch of my upper lip, cool as a ball-peen hammer, and gesture into the vaulted dark where a mountain lion perches on a column, rabbit clasped between paws. Their fingers knit into mine, keeping me tight to their side as we walk by denizens of the forest, sovereigns of the desert, sages of the Arctic, inhabitants of the many-mooted ocean. Crates of caribou antlers, stacks of tortoiseshell, a whale's jawbone we pass beneath like a bower, hibernacula sliced from the ground, sleeping snouts missed glass. 2 mournful musk oxen guard the door, and the archivist opens it with keys muffled in a leather case. Inside, we skate across a diorama's wavered glass to a mannequin draped in deerskin, a giant trout on a spear lifted from the water. We kneel at the mannequin's feet, and the archivist taps the fish. Its mouth spills red dust. I hold my breath. There, the archivist palm on the back of my neck. I know it's time. I have to ask them. This poem is called In the Archive of Possible Utterances. I know it's time. I have to ask them about my grandfather laughing. My commanders liked me so much, they kept me from all that. Women huddled on the mountain, concertina wire respooled after the camp was cleared. Instead, I offer the verso of a note I never answered from a girl I met at a gas station who wanted someone to be nice to her and only knew the word boyfriend to ask for it. I offer the gravel driveway her brother dragged us down. My silence is the screwdriver I used to open the front of the archivist's throat. Sorry. I offer the gravel driveway her brother dragged us down. My silence is the screwdriver I used to open the front of the archivist's throat, revealing a mouthpiece from a portable radio transmitter. When I press my mouth against it, I kiss my own ghosts and the echoes of all we never became. Oh, good thing I wasn't drinking that water. It would be worse if I tried to keep her out, by the way. Okay, I think I have this bad habit of knowing how much time I have, but not noting what time I began. So, 5 minutes?
Sorry, I was thinking more 10. Al, do you have a sense?
You didn't. Okay. Okay, I have a couple left, but I was like, I should skip them. I've gone over, but I have a couple more minutes. Okay. So this is one of my more nerdy moments. So I imagined that when people spoke into the throat of the archivist, their stories would be recorded and cataloged. So this poem is called TJ 1015.h66, which is Library of Congress cataloging conventions, referring to material culture. Oh, and if folks don't know, a pneumatic tube, it like they used to have them at banks, and you would like put your slip in there and it would take them away. And the New York Public Library works on a closed stack system, and so you request something and they put it in a pneumatic tube, and then you sit at a desk and like magically things appear. So TJ 1015.h66. We are only pneumatic tubes shuttling information. Only the question information leaves, a shadow of something passing. Look up, empty sky. The question left by the buttermilk scar along a girl's knee where nurses swabbed the wound free of gravel and sewed up her imagined future. We are only the question when the fog lifts, will there be snow on the mountain? The question of the palm turned and not its meaning, plea, prayer, offering, or reaching to feel if snow is falling. Only the palm turned, waiting for someone to reach across the distance from bed to chair. Only the creak of the chair and the tick-tick of moons dropping from bag to tube. We are only the crunching of gravel. Come here, babe. We are only the crunching of gravel as the car turns into the drive, headlights sweeping over two girls tangled in shadows. We are only the waiting for the car door to open, waiting like the rabbit waits in the light the motion detector clicked on. We are only the ruffle of fur above her heart as she waits for the dark so she can scatter. We are only the grip turning a girl's hand white as she yanks away in the light. only the burn of nerves as the blood returns, the itch of it, hot as guilt. This is called Of What Is Not Written, the Archive Only Dreams. And it mentions a junkie's darkroom, and that refers to W. Eugene Smith, who was a photographer for Life magazine. He was addicted to heroin, and he did this project called Dream Street, where he took photographs of Pittsburgh. So that's what, it's just a little mention, but I like to shout him out because he's a wonderful photographer. He died due to injuries, being beaten to death by security guards at a nuclear power plant in Japan because he was cataloging the effects of that. That's none of that is in this poem, but I don't know, it's information. You should look him up. He would like paint his negatives. It's time for me to stop talking, I think. He would paint his negatives with bleach to get the contrast up. Of What Is Not Written, the Archive Only Dreams. When the archive dreams of Pittsburgh, smoke pours from the stacks and librarians don goggles, wrap the books in tarp. When the archive dreams of Pittsburgh, I perch on an overhead crane and watch as a silhouette emerges from a row of hook blocks, shimmying with a pole to open the furnace. Molten spreads along the paper under the red light of a junkie's darkroom. I stumble into the parking lot where the archivist kneels, easing gas masks off goldfinches. They lean back on their heels, unhook their collar, already blackened, lift a fresh one from a nearby briefcase. We are high up in an office at Gulf Oil, unwrapping roast beef sandwiches. Meanwhile, the archive dreams of a woman taking off her apron, sitting in the quiet, her coffee speckled with the 3 drops of cream she allows herself. I want to sit next to her, but even the archivist's magic only takes us to the lip of the unrecorded. Once I fell in love with a woman who'd been a thief. She kept her juvenile release papers in a box with dried out Wet n Wild makeup to remind us how little we have to take from them. She touched me like a lockpick, like she was listening for tumblers to click into place. She touched me as if I wasn't already a gate hanging from broken hinges. In the parking lot, I finger ruffles edged in gold on the porcelain doll the archivist slipped into my pocket before the librarians joined us. I remember finding one just like it. Or is this the same one amidst scarves and perfume bottles in my grandfather's attic, an elegant dream of summer blushing under parasols along an American river, a reminder a woman lived in this house, made it possible for us to forget her. So I'll end with this shorter one. As you can imagine, the researcher and the archivist are getting very flirty. And so this is the conclusion. And I just wanted to thank all of the open mic readers. Again, I loved hearing your poems. And it's so exciting that that there's community here, even in a virtual space. And thank you again, Nina, for inviting me to participate. So this is my final piece. It's called, And in the End, the Archive Keeps Its Own Counsel. I came to the archive looking for blame, to cut like a furrow, and instead I am received, unbound, mended, laying on the archivist table, where they measure my ear, the circumference of its shadow, like paper, skin absorbs all, each tap of the service bell, every knuckle crushed into a fist, all the milkweed rolled between palms, silk unspooling. The archivist sweeps a cloth through the gully of my collarbone, thumbs my spine, looking for give where it needs repair. They fold muslin under my neck, bolster tender joints, and tip open my jaw, lift my tongue to read the utterances lodged in my throat. For my entry, they weave my present into a description using a logic I can only submit to as we float in the archive's tank of dreams, bodies stitched together with a dash. Thank you so much. And I'll introduce you to my co-star. Do you want to make an appearance? Oh, no.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
I know, she sleeps like she pays rent.
Yeah. Of course, she doesn't pay rent, and yet she sleeps.
Yeah, and she earns her keep by.
Her mind is a little bit blown with the things that I want to ask you questions about, but I am now looking forward to hearing from our next feature, Patricia Jabbeh Wesley, who immigrated to the U.S. from Liberia in 1991, I think it was during the Liberian Civil War. She's the author of 7 critically acclaimed books of poetry, including Praise Song for My Children, New and Selected Poems, Becoming Ebony, and Breaking the Silence, Anthology of Liberian Poetry. Her work has previously appeared in Transition, Prairie Schooner, New York Times Magazine, and Harvard Review. Her awards include the 2022 Theodore Roethke Memorial Poetry Prize for Praise Song for My Children, the 2022 Levinson Prize from the Poetry Foundation, and the Edward Stanley Poetry Prize. She is professor of English at Penn State, and welcome, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here, Patricia.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And I am very honored to be reading with everyone tonight. And I got my most pleasant surprise to be reading with somebody from Pittsburgh who has the experience of a city I adore, where 3 of my books were published, and I'm constantly there. So when you were reading, I decided to find a Pittsburgh poem, and that would be the second poem. I read a lot about Pittsburgh in different ways. Well, I have a newer poem called Pittsburgh, and that was published by Mike Sims. And I'm thinking a lot about the war going on in Israel and Gaza, and I'm a war survivor, so I lived through every war. But I will open with my biographical poem. My name is Dawanyina. Dawanyina means alien woman. So I was born and they gave me this name that I'm actually I turned out to be living, stranger woman, alien, a woman not of this world. My name is Dawanyina. My husband wanted me to recall one poem for him. Yeah. My name is Dawanyina. I am the stranger woman bearing hot coals in my palms, the woman born Nyemande Himeanyina, but the old women in the birthing chamber named Dawanyina, stranger woman, a woman not of this world, an alien coming into a new town where the Grebo language bends differently, where they do not roll their tongue the same way to say Nyemande. My mother's people renamed the woman from Bolobo, Dawanyina. That stranger, the other, that alien, Even in the villages of Liberia, people know how to discriminate the stranger woman from the town's woman. As if being born in Doloken instead of Tubaken, my father's town, wasn't alienating enough. I was born with a burning flame in my heart and in my hands and on my tongue. I do not know ice or cold and cannot know what chill feels like on skin and tongue, nor the way you put fire out. I am fire, fire maker, the bearer of flames. I fill up spaces with the burning source of my people, the forsaken, the black charcoal skin of my people, the African. We who have seen our lands and our sons snatched from us since the beginning of time. We who have seen our own sons appointed to chop off our heads and our hands and our umbilical cords and our limbs and our homelands. I come with flames shooting from my nostrils. I burn and I scorch things. I was not supposed to be woman, not supposed to sit and wait or bend so men can walk upon my bare back, not supposed to be the canal where children flow from my body like a stream, as if this was all I was made to do. I was not supposed to be what they thought I was supposed to be. As a child, my father tried turning me into a son, into a lion, into fire, into a body of water flowing with fire, into the ocean just beyond the hills from our home, to fill the many spaces his sisters never filled. Into a goddess, a fiery flame in her hand, to burn and burn and burn. He tried to create a man out of the rubble of my being, out of my womanness. But then here I am, fire, fire. And I became me, Dawanyana, daughter of the lion, daughter of burning flames, stirrer of all things, daughter of woman, wet from toil. Daughter of two towns whose grables sound the same, but not really the same. Dawanyana, without a town, born in alien country, aging in alien country. I was supposed to be a man, they said, but I declined the offer. And then I will read my Pittsburgh poem. And when and it's interesting. She's talking about places that I have lived, that like Indiana and PA. And I think you did well selecting the two of us. You know, she's my baby sister. She looks like one of those friends like Jen, Betty, and all those friends I have in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh. This city of hills and rivers and steel, always the slant in the road, the winding falling cliffs, the escape route through which I come to find myself. The city where if you can cry loud and hard, all you do is replace the river. So when the land comes sliding down with house, pot, and pan during the rains, you may not need to swim. The tunnels never lead to the other place I have lost. And in seeking to find that place, I spill poetry in small bits of broken crumbs, in burnt metal pieces of the past of my own city. When I was a child, I used to hear of this faraway place where my people would come to drown themselves in search of America. Pittsburgh. I do not know if they found America, or if, like me, they came and went and came and went. For me, the city's roadways lead to the Strip District for cassava roots and fish and gari and sweet potato greens, where I come searching for all the condiments we could not bring with us from Africa. So I've come to the strip where streets are so jammed. If you do not pinch yourself hard enough, you might forget you are not at home in Africa. Pittsburgh, maybe someday I may discover why you do not go away. Even when I drive away to the small town where I have buried myself like a seed, whether it is your merging river or your hills rising into other hills, or the tunnels, or the ghosts of my people who used to come here looking for home, or just the wandering in my feet looking for home, I do not know. I read a lot about war. I'm gonna stop this. I read a lot about war, and my new manuscript, or whatever it would be, it's over 100 pages, and my publisher is negotiating publishing a collected edition because they are tired of publishing. I think they're trying to publish that so I would stop. So working on that, and then I put some of these in there and make a newer collected edition. But they said they can't take the whole book. I wrote this poem about war, and this is new, and I haven't even gotten into those others yet. It's called Your People Will Be My People. And I thought it reminds me of where the war is right now. And as a Christian, as I read the Bible a lot, but this is about my country and the war, and I always feel like I live with ghosts. I live with the spirits of those who have refused to die. Because I saw the massacres, and I saw the beheading of people. I saw the splitting of the bellies of women as we fled. And we survived. And they live with me. And I live to tell their story. Your people will be my people. Sometimes I hear my house speaking to me in small bangs, a crack here, a crack there, 16 years. The stairs have got steeper, longer, higher. All my knees have given in to my years that were splintered around these lonely hills. This Pennsylvania landscape of uneven spaces like ghosts coming out of new walls, these things that inhabit a home before we sign away our lives at the broker's office. These ghosts that follow us after we fled the war dead, we passed along laborious roadways in search of refuge. Those clinging ghosts of the dead from Soul Cleaning Rubber Bush Displaced Refugee Center, where rebels executed tens of thousands of our own kinsfolk, mothers, fathers, friends, neighbors, children, whole families. Ghosts clinging forever to us as we fled, visiting, following after all these years to live where we will live like Ruth to Naomi. Entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Your country will be my country. Where you die, we will die again and again. Like they killed us, we will die 1,000,000 times, buried with you. And as long as you live, we will live forever and ever. Well, I'm the one that makes the evening I'm the one that makes the evening a little bit different. I won't say depressing. Americans always say, oh, it's so depressing. I'm like, the entire freaking world is depressing. Somebody's got to write about it. But I don't want to read another war poem right now. Son, I want to read, okay. I want to read a tiny one from The River is Rising, just got republished after it was out of print for a few years. It was my third book. I'm going to read a poem called Taboo. I come from a culture of taboos. Okay, you can't do this. You're a woman. You can't throw trash out at night because you will meet the ancestors on their visit. You can't do this. A man cannot be his wife when she's pregnant. All kinds of taboos. Okay, taboo. Arrangements for my coming into the world are incomplete pieces of letters and promises. A clause that ends with a cough, a deep sigh in the middle of a sentence. That one sentence that was not said, the knowing and not knowing how other girls left their babies in buckets and outdoor toilets, went to school the next day with well-ironed skirts, combed hair, and a smile. That was the word you didn't say. Strong-willed fetus refusing to go away. They have dry lapa on the clothesline in April, and mama, they drop out just so I would be me. My mother tried to abort me, and I stubbornly refused. And so, and she always said, "Get out of here! I tried to get rid of you, and you didn't. I didn't succeed. You know, now you have to feed me." I have a poem here to a special friend who was a poet, Art Smith. He was a professor at Tennessee, and he was one of my biggest fans. I didn't even know him when he nominated me to go teach at Tennessee. They just said, "Come here, we want you to teach." And I went, and I wanted to know who wanted to offer me the job. It took me a while before I found out it was Art. And he was my fan all those years. Even though I didn't go to Tennessee, I came to Penn State. And then he died. And what hurt me was the only time I didn't know anything about Art was when he died. I didn't hear for 3 days. An elegy for Art Smith. Some days were created out of the womb of a woman only for grieving, for the flow of tears, for sitting with your hands on your lap, just shaking your head because you've just lost a dear loved one. Today is that sort of day, so gloomy, all the darkness of earth coming out of the wounds of earth, coming out of the wounds of unspent years in protest against death. If this were in the evening, the stars will now come out. This is when the moon stands still, when children decide to tease the moon and make it follow them. But the moon does not follow because something as horrible as death has happened. This is when a metaphor stands in awe because a doorway and its own door has shut. I am in grief, Art, that you are dead, that you died 3 days ago, died the way a poem dies in its own heart, died the way blankets fold themselves after their owner takes leave of them finally, the way birds fly south, the way the hills collapse after days of torrential rainfall. That dying only a poet does, because after all, their words have broken through doors of many hearts. They take leave as if they didn't say a word to push off the call of death. Art Smith, I did not know you before you came, like fresh wind at dawn, drawn only by poetry, or like leaves fly in search of new ground. After fall, strong winds toss them into your yard. The news say you are no more, Art, that you are gone, the way we lose everything, the way we lose ourselves, the way words are lost from lips, the way our word falls under us. But you are not dead, buddy. You are only gone from us and from the body of things as we see them with our bare eyes. You are here in this room where I sit laboring over your poem. You are alive, dear art, as the wind lives on. Okay, this is the anthology. I'm going to read something from it. Yesterday, November 12th, was it's a day in infamy in my original country, Liberia. It was the day of a failed coup in which hundreds of people were killed in the streets. And this poem was written in 2015. I'll never forget November 12th. Today's November 13th. So I want to remember Liberia. Even as they go for elections tomorrow, I want to remember Liberia. I pray that nobody with blood on their hands will win the election. November 12, 2015. November 12, 30 years after our failed coup. And I am driving through another city. Hills, valleys, old houses clinging to years gone. I've been an alien so long, sometimes I feel like belonging. But the ground here is gray, soft, clay rocks in between white soil, clay enough to turn soil into pots and plates into jugs. Difference is measured not only in the cold November frost, the falling leaves, or in the slow yellowing of oak. Even though we know that no matter how long it takes the oak to yellow and turn red like fire, red like blood, no matter how stubborn its will, the oak will shed its leaves like all the other trees, become as brittle as dry limbs after the forest fire. November 12th, and my mind takes me way back home. Home, the humid sun, bright, hot like fire. In a town divided by the ocean and the river, the past of bloodshed. The burning anger and pain when years ago a hero came, or shall we call him coward? Thomas Kunyukwa, coup planner, or shall we call him the messenger of death sent by alien people to rob us of home? Liberia, fire, death, the massacre of our people, the beginning of the rest of our lives in exile. November 12th, as I drive through this strange town where for years my heart has longed for home, the early morning mist rising out of the Mesorado, the honking cars, the market women on their way to work, and out of nowhere, my neighbor's voice is shouting at another hard day. November 12th, but this is where a road leads home. The earth's red, blood, and water, my family line, where the soil still holds onto my umbilical cord, buried in the hills of Doloke, home, and Morovia, where my father's grave awaits my return. So I can kneel and cry and pray and tell him how sometimes I am so lonely in this faraway country. I want to walk and walk and walk and walk until I'm back home again. November 12th, no matter how ugly they say home looks, there's never a day when you do not want to go back home. Okay, I think I will read one last poem. I don't know my time, but I don't want to take up your whole day and they want to discuss. So I will read the title poem of this book, and then I will end my reading, even if I'm not done, because there's nobody here to hit me on the head and say, stop reading, woman. Okay. So
That's
I'm going to.
one thing that happens with or can't happen with the virtual reading is I can't hit you on your head.
Yeah, I don't know. You got to try, invent a new way. Okay. You got to try. I mean, you're doing a lot, 20 years, and you haven't come up with something, huh? Oh my. Okay. Praise song for my children. This one is rating a lot in my some of my poems are rating in my language, in my head, in my language, so that the syntax and things are different. So this is praise song for my children. Let me be your mommy water, your river G, crossing you into old Greybush country. After the hills gave way, after the truck slides through mud and rocks, through dangerous muddy ditches along Swedru's lost forests in search of our father's homelands. Let me be your mama Africa, your mama that grew out of old streams of old rivers, from Kerebo to Kaloken, all the way to Tubaken, where after so long, only small roosters remain in a town that used to be ours. Let me come to you at dawn, my children, my calabash wet from the early dawn's water fetching run, my lapa wet from the brush, from the cry of old pepper birds, the owls howling, from the old footpaths lost to the wanderer's feet. Let me come to you bearing tears on my face after the war, after the villages have crumbled under the weight of grave hate. Let me be your landfill, your garbage dump, the one only who could carry you in her young, supple womb, carrying you with my youth, carrying you, even though Liberia was losing herself. And from afar, we could see the oncoming smoke of war. Let me come to you bearing palm branches that wither too quickly in the heat of March. Here, take from my hand and drink, my child, one by one, take and drink. After the afterbirths have parched her, in the soil where we did not bury them. After our feet have become parched from running, after our way back home has been burned by war. Let me be your mommy water, your mama rising out of the wind of ocean tides. Let me be your consolation that the land I gave to you is dying. I am becoming an old woman now, my sons. I am becoming my mother and her mother's mother. I am becoming the ghost of my mothers. I am becoming Ai, bow-legged. I am becoming fire and rain. I am becoming Sibo. I am becoming the water bearer. I am becoming the calabash that was not shattered in the shattering. Let me sing to you, my daughters, you who have never known where we come from. You who will never know your mother's tongue. You who have become the metaphor of lost warriors who were captured by war. Let me be your songwriter, the song you sing, the dirge you do not know how to sing. Let me wrap around you my lapa that has been lost in the storm. Let me lay them all down for you to walk on, my blood-stained lapas from the wall. Let me come to you, my daughters, when the sun has become yellow and then red, when it seems the sun is falling down on us. Let me come to you carrying the moon in my warm palms. Let me be your mommy water, your old mama rising out of the waves of war. Let me be your roadmap home. Let us walk together homeward, where the ocean roars in peace and in war, the rising tides along Liberia's coast. Let me be your tears. Let me be your mesorado. When I rise at dawn, my children, I long for you, but I long for home more. I long for a lost country I still seek to know. When I rise, my sons, I long for the sound of the drum that used to say Atuakai. I long for cassava shoots and the banana tree to bloom again. I long for me. I long for the girl that was lost. I long to find my feet again, to find my feet again, to find my feet again. I long to be me. Let me come to you carrying hope in my hands. Let me come to you carrying hope in my hands. Let me come to you, my daughters, carrying hope in my hands. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much. That just kind of blew me away. And I imagine everyone else. And I can't wait to start this conversation with you. And in a moment, Bill is going to have us all pinned so that we can see each other as we talk. I think he will. But while, let's see, is this going to happen? I'm seeing, there we go. And in a moment, we're going to have, there we go. Okay, good. And you guys don't need to be muted because we're going to be having a conversation. This has just been kind of, my mind is blown in part because the two of you have created such different worlds in your reading. And so I'm going to start by asking each of you a biggish question that is probably not going to be relatable to the other person's work. And then I'm going to ask you to each ask the other person a question. But let me start with Patricia. I'm a psychotherapist, and so I'm really, really interested when I'm dealing with the arts side of myself and my connections with others. I'm interested in the experience of creating. And so here you are, you know, with two homes. One from which you have been exiled, one in which you have who knows what experience of belonging. When you write in about or from one place or another, what's the difference in your experience?
Well, well, one of the beautiful things about being cross-cultural, because even when I was in my country writing, I started writing as a child. I had the Western world alongside my world. In fact, I started studying poetry first from my father's English literature book called England in Literature in the 50s when he was in college. So I studied on my own because I used to love poetry. He just would give me these books, and I had this thick book, and I studied. I read these poems like I knew the authors and I loved them. And I was 13 and 14 and 15. And this was just extra work on my own. So when I write, it depends on the experience. And when I went to grad school and did a PhD, I was influenced by American authors too. I was influenced by all kinds of American authors. Like Marie Howe was one of my loved ones because I love her couplets. And so my book and Becoming Ebony and The River is Rising, especially Becoming Ebony was my dissertations, all couplets, almost all couplets, influenced by Marie Howe. And I love Robert Frost to death. I could have married him. I loved him. I even have poems dedicated to him. And I love Allen Ginsberg and William Carlos Williams and Wallace Stevens. So I can go, if I'm writing about my American experience or poking fun of myself as an American, my experience is to write in that style that you would write in. And then when I want to write about something that is about my country, and then my African oral tradition, I grew up on African oral tradition. And that is very interesting. Like, it's different from you. So if I walk into the midst of my people, they will start singing poetry to me. They will start reciting my praise names. That one, they will sing them in historical order until they get to my father's line. So they will start from the great ancestors, and they praising you, then you have to keep saying thank you in your language. So all that oral tradition and all the proverbs, and they are part of the culture and some of the things they say. So some of those things I'm saying when I say lay the lapa down for you to walk on, that's a tradition, when you graduate, you're coming home, all the women in the town line up the driveway or the road with their wrappers, and that's your red carpet, and they like, we naked ourselves for you. And so all of that is what's happening in this, and some of the rhythm and the music is their praise songs I'm either inventing or recreating. And so I get into that spirit, and the experience depends on like when you guys when Robbie was reading, I felt terrible. I wanted to write a poem, and I wrote a little poem, and that was in the American, something she said, and they took me to Let It Die Dying. I don't know, and I say, when Let It Die Die, I found her on my doorstep, and that morning, and waiting for me. And then I talk about picking up the newspaper, and there she was, and I described, and it was a Sunday morning where the newspaper person had thrown her. He probably didn't know it was my princess in that headlines, and how I pick up the paper and closed my door and screamed and fell on the carpet crying. And my husband came, and I said, she's dead. And so that would be a little bit a dirge, dirge-like, because I'm being African and wailing for an English queen and princess, And so, so it depends on the inspiration. And when inspirations come to me, I have to write it right away. Yeah, I don't care, even if the baby is going to be crying. My husband used to say she loves her poetry more than her children. So that's what happens. Yeah.
All right. So then my next question for Elizabeth is, and maybe there's a connection between these two poets, which has to do with relationship. In your collection, Elizabeth, there's the relationship between archivist, archive, and what is being archived. And there's the sense I have of the archivist or the archive, the archivist as being like a censor, shutting the mouth of that which is going to be either included or excluded or curated. And then there's some point in which that which was to be archived, the subject, as it were, or object, is reaching inside the mouth of the archivist, if I was hearing you right. So I don't even know what kind of what my question is about it, but you pulled me into this weird world of objectification, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That's being where your different characters, if you will, are objectifying each other, perhaps, but also in relation to each other. Just elaborate whatever thoughts that inspires.
Oh gosh. It's interesting, this idea of like the connection between the two of us. And one of the things that struck me when Dr. Jabbeh Wesley was reading was materials and objects having agency, and also materials and objects as like history containers or history character carriers. And so like there was a moment where you wrote about the house is talking to me, or the way the city, Pittsburgh, refuses to go away from you. So the agency of the materiality of the city, and like the Lapas returning over and over again in the final poem. So I think objectification, that word is bad, right? We shouldn't objectify each other, but there's a way that we have relations to each other, and we also have relation to objects, and objects, the way objects are arranged, assert power and shape our lives. So I think that is many of, I just read this fascinating book by Scott Herring called The Hoarders, which is about material culture and the policing of the way we interact with objects. So like, when does a collector become a hoarder? It's not the amount of stuff, but it's the wrong stuff. It's not participating in the ideology of collecting that makes that where you choose correct objects or objects that have been deemed of value. And I think that relation to objects is a narrative that is also mapped onto people, right? Like, who are the right people to be archived? Who are the right people to be included? And then is there something perverse or resistant about holding on to objects that aren't the right objects, and holding on to people who aren't worthy of memory? I think those are some of the things I was thinking about. I don't know what happens when I write. It's very hard.
Well, the archivist's choice determines what is going to be valued, right? Mm-hmm. Whether or not, as you said, it's meaningful, or kind of where the meaning is somehow lost through disconnection. I don't know if that makes any sense, but in any case, maybe this does bring us back to the conversation between the two of you. You kind of did that very, very well. Do you have any reactions to that, Patricia? You're muted. You're muted. There you are.
Yeah, I love reading with her because I have a son who's a curator. My 34-year-old son is a curator. He's an artist. He can draw you the way he could draw you the way you look since he was a kid. Okay, he's decided to be a curator. He works at he's a curator at MoMA. And so when you're reading these poems, I see myself in what you're doing so many times. In fact, I have a poem called I'm Becoming a Book. But the poem is not really about me becoming a book. It's about how all the significant things that have happened to me happen either in the library or just after the library. And because as a college student, even as a high school student, I lived in the library. I lived on books. And so the poem makes fun of the whole idea of how I met my husband in the library. Okay, I met my husband in the library. I had my first daughter after studying all day at IU library and going home. And then I went into labor. I was like pregnant and in the library all day, all weekend, and had a baby from going up and down the stairs. So the poem talks about, I was probably holding a book when I was born. In fact, even though I was born in a village, and maybe there was no book in our village, but I might have come with my own book in my hand. So when you were reading, I thought, this is just amazing that she is talking about how words, that she's using a poem that contains words to talk about the storehouse of words and how we protect words and protect things in the museum or archive, art within art. And I thought it was very clever, you know. And so it's very interesting tonight that we are paired together. Well, good thing she's much younger. So that's where this age is where the similarities end, you know. And so I don't know if I answered that question, but I think I wanted to spend more time praising her.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like one of the things about a writer is that you work a lot in silence. So you never know if, you know, even when my book came out, my book just came out and then like nothing changed, you know? And so it's to get that affirmation from someone whose work is so extraordinary, is so meaningful, and I'm really grateful. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I loved, I want to learn from you, particularly about rhythm and repetition. Like you talked about the praise song, and there was this way that, you know, somebody I think mentioned the anaphora, right? Like the repetition at the beginning of the line, but then there would be like this other repetition happening in the second half of the line. So like the Dawayina repeated over and over again, and the Lapas repeated over and over again. So it was like the let me on this side, but then the Lapas on the other side. And so I just was like very, you know, my ears were really alert to what you were doing with repetition. And I'd love to hear you talk about like how you craft. Can I have your secrets, please?
How I craft it. I think, let me tell you, my biggest influence in life, other than my culture, is music. I am a lover of music. I don't care. You know, I grew up where they say, you're a Christian girl, you can't listen to that thing. I'm like, you say what? I listen to music. I love country music because of its storytelling. I die to listen to James Taylor. He's my boyfriend. I could listen to him all. So I love music, and I love African music and all the rhythms. I think music is important to me. I think it influences me. But I also come from a culture of repetition. I am happy that, okay, this is what happened to this book, the one that has the praise song section. When I came to the country, my first book was very African. And it was very African because I had a lot of my culture on me, 91 when we came. So when Herb Scott, which I have another powerful poem to Herb Scott, whom I love, he was the founder of New Issues Press. And he used to say, what is all this repetition about? And I'm like, it's African poetry. And he was my professor and mentor and publisher. And then he gave up. He gave up because he realized that was me. Okay. And he realized I wasn't going to write like other people. But then he found a book, and he thought I had something in common with a poet whose book he gave me. But so the culture had an impact on me. Then I began to stray away from it because I was away from home a long time, from the culture a long time. So in 2016, I used to visit Liberia almost every year, but I didn't go into the villages. So in 2016, I took a road trip from Monrovia, about 375 miles, terrible road, through the entire country. And then I saw the culture, because when you travel through Liberia, you see one tribe, the way African cities work or towns work, certain people, like people in Atuna, would speak a totally different language. Then the people in Pittsburgh would be speaking a different language. Then the people in, Erie will be speaking a different language, or maybe in Philadelphia, they speak a different language. So all the socio-linguistic changing of the languages, and then you see the similarity, you stop and you talk to people, and then until we got close to my county, then the language spoken began to change and get closer to my language, Grebo. And then I spoke my language to a guy at a shop, and he understood me. And he was shocked that I spoke my language, because he knew I came from America with my car and everything. And then he spoke his language and I understood it. But by the time I had left Liberia, my newer poems changed, went back to my old culture. That's where praise song for my children came from. And there are certain poems in there that are very musical. So the longer I'm away from Africa, from the villages and the culture, the more I become American. Yeah, so my style is just myself. This is what I advise you to be. Be yourself. It is me. It's not, in fact, it's not like every African. This guy, were you the one reading and cracking us up? I have funny poems, but you had done all the funny poems for us tonight. I thought he's crazy. He's completely insane. He's reading and we are laughing. So I think you should stay with your voice. And repetition is in my culture. Like we say, I'm hungry, plenty. I love you so much. You fine girl. That is our culture. You fine girl. You so fine. As if to say one fine is not beautiful enough. Okay. So repetition is what the culture is. So that's all you're seeing there. I said if people knew, and one interesting thing, one time I was invited to Chicago to speak to our indigenous people. We have a lot of Liberian immigrants in this country who are completely illiterate. They cannot read and write. So they invited me to read poetry to them, the whole room full of them, hundreds of them. When I began reading, they began to scream and they were crying. They are literally illiterate, but they understood the culture. They understood what I was doing, and they saw the words and what I was doing with legend, with mythology, and with parables and proverbs, and those that's what makes, and that's different. And like I tell my students, they say I come from a small town, there's only one gas station there. I don't know what to read about. I say, where I come from, there is no gas station. They sell gas in the bottles. So, and I still write poetry about that town. So you get ready. So yeah, I think my style is nothing special. It's just me. It's just my, and the poem that one, describes who I am. I'm a troublemaker.
Yeah, I think that kind of points to Nina's question about place, is this idea that, there could be the idea that there are these two separate places, but in some ways, with our language, we can make a place and we can make our home. So we can be at home wherever we go, because we call back to these rhythms that we grew up hearing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Nina.
And one thing that when I came up for tenure, Art Smith was the one who wrote one of my external letters. And where the university was they were shamelessly quoting him because he was mad in the letter. And he was mad that they made me go through tenure, the full 5 years, when they had promised me early tenure. So he was so mad. And this is the thing Art Smith wrote. And he said, 50 years after Patricia is dead, before people will realize what she's doing. I didn't know I was doing it until I heard him. And now I hear critics say that I brought Africa to converse on the same page with the West. So many African writers who write their books in Africa, and then here I was writing and bringing Gribble and putting it in poetry and forcing American English to meet this Africa that I had. And he said I was bringing a different culture and a different language to converse on the same page with America and with the West, with the English. And he said it would take 50 years before people would see what she's doing. If you knew what she was doing, you would have given her tenure at the door. And that's why, and they quoted that in my letter, So I think I think I always wanted to see how I could, and I struggled. The first book or two I published, the publishers were asking me questions like, but why can't you put that in English? I'm like, find the English word for IE. IE is, if you go through the book, you see IE running through. IE means my grandmother. It means grandmother, but it's not grandmother. It means a great mother. It means the woman next door who has taken care of you all your life, your nanny, your mom's mother, or your mom, your friend's grandmother who has taken you. So IE is not just your grandmother. And so I said, if you find an English word for that, I will remove it. But now nobody asks me any question. I think one of the things that happens is when you publish your first or one or two books, they ask you a lot of questions and they fight you. But then when they realize that the books are selling anyway, they don't ask you anymore. So you put all the junk in and you put it junk.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah. But I wanted to say, yeah, okay.
No, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say thank you to the open mic was not open mic. It was like listening to these great poets, I don't, and I'm so glad that it's like this here. All of you have so much that I learned from, and the different voices. I know you are all established poets, but usually we go to open mic and we have these students reading the Thunder poems, and it's different. But tonight it was like, we all are the featured poets, and it was really fun. And I was only one prose writer, thank you so much for your story. Yeah, that's you. Yeah.
Elizabeth, any last comments?
Oh, goodness.
Put you on the spot or anything.
Yeah, that's such a big question. I have a lot of things in my head, but I'm a very slow thinker. I'll have something brilliant to say in response to all this in like 2 weeks.
Poetry is a great form for slow thinkers.
Yeah.
I wish we could continue this conversation. And if next time, Patricia, you come to Chicago, and if that's the same time that you come up, or maybe I could reach out to you if Patricia tells me she's coming, and I'll say, hey, Elizabeth, come on up here and we'll all hang out.
Yeah, it's in
Yeah,
UC
Chicago.
Grand Rise.
Yeah, I used to live in Michigan 12 years. That's my other home. Michigan is actually more of my home than Pennsylvania.
I don't accept that.
Oh, yeah. Michigan is my home. I'm telling you.
Once you fall in love with the strip district, it's hard. It's hard. So I guess maybe one thing I will say is, like, I think so I grew up in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh has a really big poetry scene.
Yeah.
And then also the strip district is this, it's called the strip district because it's on a narrow strip of land. And there's this place called Pennsylvania Macaroni where you can go in and sample like 400 different kinds of cheeses. And so growing up, I didn't realize that certain things were like elitist or like reserved for like educated people. You know, I thought everyone went to poetry readings and ate Italian cheese and made fresh pasta. It wasn't until I moved away and was like, oh, I'm going to be a poet. And people were like, you know, oh yeah, Gerald Stern. Yeah. This idea that poetry is like elitist or inaccessible became, I heard that and I was like, oh, that's so strange. Like we read poetry in bars, you know, like, yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say is I got a chance to study with Michael Harper, and he taught us all of our forms, right? We learned the sonnet, we learned the ballad, we learned the ballade, we learned the sestina, and we also had to write Liberian style praise songs.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I will not share that. It was bad.
Yeah, Gerald Stern, somebody mentioned him. I read with him a few times in Pittsburgh for the City Asylum. He's gone now. It was a great guy.
I think Terry has worked with him quite a bit. But until you come to Chicago, I want to thank you both for your warmth and your craft and your inspiration and your gift. And to the open mic and all of us here, thank you for being with us and making beauty. Actually, I wanted to say one thing, which was give something going into this Thanksgiving stretch. Give something that someone else can be thankful for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you,
much,
guys.
Corwin.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It was
Thank
a
you for
wonderful
inviting
night.
me. It was an honor.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, and aloha. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.